thought he'd never find a way to reach his mother again after she lost her hearing. But then, a mysterious woman appeared, speaking a silent language he didn't yet understand, and everything began to change. What she knew could solve a case and heal a heart. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The rain fell in steady sheets across Boston's cobblestone streets that October evening in 1897, turning the gas-lit thoroughfares into ribbons of shimmering gold and shadow. Detective William Hartford stood beneath the awning of the police headquarters on Pemberton Square, his tall frame silhouetted against the warm light spilling from the building's windows. At 32 years of age, he had earned a reputation as one of the city's most capable investigators, his sharp mind and imposing physical presence making him formidable in the pursuit of justice. His dark hair, slightly dampened by the mist, fell across his forehead as he gazed out at the storm, lost in thoughts of the peculiar case that had landed on his desk that very afternoon. A young woman had disappeared from her position as a seamstress at the prestigious Ashford Manor, leaving behind only a cryptic note written in what appeared to be some form of code. The household staff had been questioned, but none could provide any useful information. The lady of the house, Mrs. Catherine Ashford, had insisted on discretion, fearing scandal might tarnish her family's standing in Boston society. William had agreed to investigate quietly, though something about the circumstances troubled him deeply. He pulled his wool coat tighter against the October chill and stepped into the rain, his leather boots splashing through puddles as he made his way toward Beacon Hill. His thoughts turned, as they often did during moments of solitude, to his mother. Eleanor Hartford had been a vibrant woman once, full of laughter and warmth. But 3 years ago, a sudden illness had left her completely deaf, stealing away the world of sound she had always known. The change had devastated her, turning her inward, making her hesitant to venture beyond the walls of their modest brownstone home. William's heart ached each time he saw her sitting by the window, her once bright eyes now clouded with loneliness and isolation. The detective had tried everything to help her reconnect with the world. He had hired specialists, purchased books on lip reading, even attempted to learn some basic gestures himself, but nothing seemed to bridge the vast silence that had enveloped his mother. She smiled when he visited, touched his face with gentle hands, but he could see the sorrow lurking behind her eyes, the weight of a world she could no longer fully participate in. As William approached Ashford Manor, an imposing 3-story brick mansion adorned with elaborate cornices and tall windows, he noticed a figure standing near the servants' entrance. The rain had begun to ease into a gentle drizzle, and in the soft glow of a nearby street lamp, he could make out the silhouette of a young woman. She wore a simple gray dress with a white collar, her dark hair pinned neatly beneath a modest hat. There was something about the way she stood, perfectly still yet alert, that caught his attention. She appeared to be waiting for someone, her hands clasped before her, her posture graceful despite the humble nature of her attire. As William drew closer, she turned toward him, and he found himself momentarily arrested by the sight of her face. She possessed a delicate beauty that seemed almost ethereal in the lamplight. Her features refined and gentle, with large expressive eyes that held an unusual depth of intelligence and compassion. Despite her simple clothing, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that spoke of inner strength and character. William touched the brim of his hat in greeting. The young woman's eyes widened slightly, and she offered a small, uncertain smile. Then, to his surprise, her hands began to move in a series of graceful, deliberate gestures. He recognized it immediately as sign language, though he understood none of it. His expression must have betrayed his confusion, for the woman's smile faded, replaced by a look of resignation he had seen too many times on his mother's face. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small notebook and pencil, writing quickly before turning it toward him. The gaslight illuminated her careful script. "I am Miss Clara Bennett. Are you from the police regarding Miss Sarah Porter?" William nodded, pulling out his own notebook. "Detective William Hartford. Yes, I am investigating her disappearance. Did you know Miss Porter?" Clara's hands moved to write again, her movements efficient and practiced. "She was my friend. We worked together here at the manor. I am the lady's companion to Mrs. Ashford. Sarah told me she was frightened the day before she disappeared, but she would not say why. I found something that might help." The detective's interest sharpened immediately. "What did you find?" Clara glanced around the empty street before writing once more. "Not here. Too many eyes at the manor. There is a tea room on Charles Street, the Bramble Rose. Can you meet me there tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock? I will bring what I found. William studied her face, searching for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. Instead, he saw only earnest concern and a determined intelligence that reminded him powerfully of his mother in her younger days. There was something trustworthy about Clara Bennett, something that went beyond her appearance or circumstances. He found himself wanting to know more about her, this silent young woman who communicated with such grace through her hands. I will be there, he wrote in response. 3 o'clock at the Bramble Rose. Clara's relief was visible in the softening of her features. She wrote one more line. Thank you, Detective. I want to help find Sarah. She was kind to me when others were not. As she turned to leave, William found himself calling out, Miss Bennett, forgetting for a moment that she could not hear him. She had already begun to walk away, her figure growing smaller in the misty evening. He stood there for a long moment, watching her disappear around the corner, an unexpected warmth spreading through his chest. There was something about Clara Bennett that had touched him in a way he had not anticipated, something that made him think of connection and understanding across the barriers of silence. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having swept away the humidity and left behind crisp autumn air. William spent the hours before his meeting reviewing what little information he had about Sarah Porter's disappearance. The young seamstress had been employed at Ashford Manor for nearly 2 years, her work apparently exemplary. No one had reported any problems or conflicts. She had simply vanished after her shift 3 evenings ago, leaving behind that strange coded note. William had shown the note to several colleagues, but none could decipher it. The symbols appeared to be a mixture of letters and odd marks, arranged in patterns that suggested meaning but revealed nothing obvious. He had a copy of the note in his coat pocket as he made his way to the Bramble Rose that afternoon, hoping that whatever Clara had discovered might shed light on the mystery. The tea room occupied the ground floor of a narrow brick building on Charles Street, its windows adorned with lace curtains and small potted plants. A bell chimed softly as William entered, and he found himself in a cozy space filled with small tables draped in white linen. The aroma of fresh bread and brewing tea filled the air, and several ladies sat in quiet conversation over delicate china cups. Clara was already seated at a corner table, her back to the wall, where she could observe the entrance. She wore a dove-gray dress today, more refined than her work clothes from the previous evening, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Her dark hair was arranged in an elegant style that framed her face beautifully. When she saw William, she smiled, and he felt that unexpected warmth again, stronger this time. He removed his hat and crossed to her table, seating himself across from her. A waitress appeared almost immediately, and William ordered tea for them both. Once they were alone again, Clara opened a small reticule and withdrew several items: a folded piece of paper, a small leather-bound journal, and what appeared to be a silver locket. Her hands moved immediately into sign language, then stopped when she remembered. With visible frustration, she reached for her notebook and began to write. William watched her hands as she formed the letters, noticing the graceful way her fingers moved, the care she took with each word. There was something mesmerizing about it, something that made him wish desperately that he could understand her natural language. Clara pushed the notebook toward him. Sarah left these hidden in our shared room. The paper matches the note the police found. The journal contains entries about someone following her, and the locket belonged to her mother, who died last year. Sarah would never leave it behind willingly. William examined each item carefully. The paper indeed matched the one found in Sarah's quarters, covered with the same mysterious symbols. The journal entries, written in a neat, anxious hand, described a man in a dark coat who appeared wherever Sarah went. She had first noticed him 3 weeks ago near the market, then outside the church she attended, then lingering across the street from Ashford Manor. This is excellent work, Miss Bennett, William wrote. Did Sarah describe this man in more detail anywhere? Clara shook her head and wrote, only that he wore a distinctive silver watch chain and walked with a slight limp. She was too frightened to approach him or report it to anyone except me. Why did she not go to the police? Clara's expression grew troubled as she wrote her response. Sarah was an orphan, Detective. She had learned not to trust that anyone would help her. She feared losing her position if she caused trouble. Mrs. Ashford values discretion above all else. William nodded slowly, understanding the painful reality Clara described. Servants, especially young women without family or connections, often had little recourse when threatened. They lived at the mercy of their employers and the whims of society. It was an injustice that had always troubled him, this disparity between those with power and those without. The waitress arrived with their tea, providing a brief interruption. William poured for both of them, noticing how Clara held her cup, the delicate way she sipped the hot liquid. Everything about her movements spoke of refinement and education, yet she worked as a lady's companion, a position that, while respectable, was still a form of service. When they were alone again, William wrote, "How long have you been deaf, Miss Bennet?" The question seemed to surprise her. Most people, he imagined, did not ask directly. They either ignored her condition or treated it as something shameful to be overlooked. Clara set down her cup and wrote with what appeared to be relief at his directness. "I was born this way. I have never heard a single sound. My parents died when I was young, and I was raised in an institution for the deaf in Hartford, Connecticut. I learned to read and write there, and they taught us sign language. It gave me a way to express myself, to communicate fully for the first time. It was like discovering I had a voice after all." William felt his chest tighten with emotion as he read her words. The parallel to his mother's situation was striking, yet also different. Clara had been born into silence, had never known the world of sound, while his mother had lost what she once possessed. But both women had experienced the isolation that came with deafness, the way society often dismissed or pitied them. "My mother is deaf," he wrote, watching Clara's face carefully. "She lost her hearing 3 years ago due to illness. She has struggled greatly with the change. She feels alone even when surrounded by people." Clara's eyes filled with understanding and compassion. She reached across the table, her hand hovering near his for a moment before she caught herself and pulled back, remembering propriety. Instead, she wrote urgently, her script less careful now, filled with emotion. "Please tell your mother she is not alone. There is a community, Detective Hartford. The deaf are not isolated except when the hearing world isolates us. There are churches with sign language services, social gatherings, schools, and most importantly, there is a beautiful language that allows us to express everything, every emotion and thought and dream. Your mother could learn it. She could find connection again." William stared at Clara's words, feeling something shift within him. For 3 years he had watched his mother withdraw, had tried various methods to help her, but it had never occurred to him that the solution might not be trying to restore what was lost, but rather embracing a new way of being. The hope in Clara's words, the conviction that his mother could find community and purpose again, struck him with the force of revelation. "Would you teach her?" he wrote, his hand slightly unsteady. "Would you teach both of us? I want to learn your language. I want to be able to communicate with my mother the way she deserves, and I want to understand you without the barrier of pen and paper." Clara's face transformed with a radiant smile that took William's breath away. In that moment, she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, her joy and enthusiasm illuminating her features with an inner light. She nodded vigorously and wrote, Yes, I would be honored. When can we begin?" "As soon as possible," William wrote. "But first, we must find Sarah Porter. Will you help me? You knew her better than anyone, and you understand things that I might miss." Clara did not hesitate. She wrote simply, "Of course. Where do we start?" William spread the mysterious note on the table between them. With this, "Do these symbols mean anything to you?" Clara studied the paper intently, her brow furrowing in concentration. After a long moment, her eyes widened, and she began writing rapidly. "Detective, these are not codes. They are signs. Someone has tried to write down sign language using letters and marks to represent hand shapes and movements. Look here, this symbol that looks like a C with a line through it. That is the sign for danger. And this one here, it means man. And this pattern means basement, or below ground." William felt excitement course through him. "Can you translate the entire message?" Clara nodded and began working through the note carefully, writing out each translated word. When she finished, she pushed the notebook toward William. He read, "Danger, man with silver chain. Following me, knows about basement, documents hidden, cannot go to police, they are watching. Trust no one at Manor. Help me." The detective's mind raced with implications. Sarah had used sign language to write her note, knowing that most people would not be able to read it. She had been clever, resourceful, even in her fear. But who had she hoped would find and understand it? And what documents was she referring to? Miss Bennet, William wrote. Did Sarah know sign language? Clara's response came quickly. She was learning. I had been teaching her for several months. She was a quick student and found it fascinating. She said it was like learning a secret language. A secret language indeed, William wrote. One that only you would understand. She left this message for you, hoping you would find it and know what to do. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she picked up her teacup. William could see the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, the fear for her friend mixed with determination. He wrote again, his words careful and sincere. You are very brave, Miss Bennet, and very loyal. Sarah was fortunate to have a friend like you. A slight blush colored Clara's cheeks as she read his words. She wrote back, Sarah was kind to me when I first arrived at the manor. The other servants did not know how to speak with me, and some were uncomfortable around me. But Sarah made an effort. She smiled at me, included me, wanted to learn my language. That kind of acceptance is rare and precious. William understood exactly what she meant. His mother had described similar experiences, the way people avoided her or spoke too loudly as if volume could overcome deafness, or treated her as if she had lost her intelligence along with her hearing. The isolation was not just physical but social, a result of others' discomfort and ignorance. We will find her, William wrote with conviction, and I promise you, Miss Bennet, I will learn your language. I want to know you, to truly communicate with you, not through pen and paper, but in your own voice. Clara's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she read his words. She looked up at him, and in that gaze, William saw something that made his heart beat faster. It was recognition, understanding, a connection that went beyond words or sound. It was the beginning of something profound, though neither of them could yet name it. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across William's study as he sat with Clara the following day, poring over the evidence they had gathered. He had invited her to his family's brownstone on Mount Vernon Street, a decision that had raised his mother's curiosity when he mentioned they would have a visitor. The house was modestly furnished but comfortable, filled with books and the warm scent of the hearth fire that burned steadily against the October chill. Clara had arrived promptly at 2 o'clock, wearing a practical navy dress with a fitted jacket, her hair arranged in a simple but elegant style. William had greeted her at the door, and as he helped her with her coat, he noticed the way her eyes took in every detail of the home. The photographs on the walls, the worn but well-loved furniture, the stack of newspapers by his father's old chair. There was an intelligence in her observation, a thoughtfulness that he found increasingly captivating. They had been working for nearly an hour when William's mother appeared in the doorway. Eleanor Hartford was a handsome woman in her late 50s, her hair silvered, but her posture still upright and graceful. She wore a burgundy day dress with delicate beading at the collar, and her eyes, so like her son's, held both curiosity and a deep-seated wariness. William had told her about Clara that morning, about her deafness and her knowledge of sign language, and he had seen the flicker of hope and fear cross his mother's face in equal measure. Now, as Eleanor stood in the doorway, Clara rose immediately from her chair. The two women looked at each other for a long moment, and William watched something pass between them, a recognition that needed no words or sounds. Clara's hands moved slowly, deliberately, forming signs that were clear and precise. William could not understand them, but he could see they were beautiful, a dance of meaning and expression. Eleanor's face crumpled, and tears began to fall down her cheeks. She shook her head, pointing to her eyes and then to Clara's hands, indicating she did not understand. Clara nodded with infinite patience and compassion. She moved closer to Eleanor, gently taking the older woman's hands in her own. Then, very slowly, Clara guided Eleanor's fingers into a simple shape, pressing them together in a specific way. William watched, his throat tight with emotion, as Clara taught his mother her first sign. It was the sign for friend. Clara repeated it several times, her movements slow and clear, until Eleanor could form it herself. When she did, Clara's face lit up with the most radiant smile, and she nodded enthusiastically. Then she taught Eleanor another sign, and another. The sign for learn, the sign for together, the sign for hope. Eleanor was weeping openly now, but they were tears of relief and joy. For the first time in 3 years, someone was speaking to her in a language designed for her, a language that did not require her to strain to read lips or to pretend she understood when she did not. Clara was offering her a bridge back to connection, to communication, to the world. William felt his own eyes burning with unshed tears. He rose from his chair and crossed to where the two women stood. Clara looked up at him, and he saw in her eyes a depth of understanding and kindness that moved him profoundly. Without thinking, he took her hand and squeezed it gently, a gesture of gratitude that transcended words. Clara squeezed back, her fingers warm and reassuring in his. For the next hour, the investigation was forgotten as Clara taught both William and his mother the basics of sign language. She showed them the alphabet, signed on one hand with specific finger positions for each letter. She taught them simple words and phrases, correcting their hand shapes with gentle touches, encouraging them with smiles and nods when they got it right. Eleanor was a quick student, her hands remembering the grace and expressiveness they had once possessed when she could hear music and dance to its rhythms. William found himself fascinated not just by the language itself but by Clara as she taught it. She was patient and encouraging, her face animated with expression that gave context to each sign. He began to understand that sign language was not merely a substitute for spoken words, but a complete language with its own grammar, its own poetry, its own unique beauty. And watching Clara sign was like watching an artist paint, each gesture purposeful and lovely. When they finally returned to the matter of Sarah Porter's disappearance, the atmosphere in the study had changed. They were no longer detective and witness, but allies united by a common language and purpose. Eleanor insisted on staying, signing haltingly that she wanted to help find the missing girl. Clara translated for William, and he nodded, grateful for his mother's presence. They spread the evidence across William's desk once more. In addition to the note and journal, William had obtained the official report from Ashford Manor. According to the housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, Sarah had finished her duties at 7 o'clock on the evening of her disappearance. She had gone to her room in the servants' quarters, where she shared space with Clara and another maid. At 9 o'clock, when the other maid went to bed, Sarah was not there. Her bed had not been slept in, and her few possessions remained untouched, except for the hidden items Clara had found. The housekeeper mentioned that Sarah had been working on a special project for Mrs. Ashford the week before she disappeared. William wrote for Clara to read. A repair to some old family documents that had been damaged by water. Do you know anything about this? Clara's expression grew thoughtful as she read. She signed her response, and William struggled to follow. He understood some of it, but Clara, seeing his difficulty, reached for the notebook and wrote, "Yes, Mrs. Ashford had Sarah working in the library, repairing old letters and documents from her late husband's family. Sarah mentioned that some of the documents were quite old, dating back to before the Civil War. She said some of them made her uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable how?" William wrote. She would not say exactly, only that they revealed things about the Ashford family that were troubling. She seemed afraid after reading them, but when I asked her about it, she said it was better if I did not know. William exchanged a glance with his mother. Eleanor, following the conversation through their writing and Clara's patient signing, looked troubled. She signed something to Clara, who nodded and translated by writing, "Your mother asks if Sarah mentioned anything about the man who was following her. Did he seem interested in the manor or in Sarah personally?" It was an excellent question, and William felt a surge of pride in his mother. Her investigative instincts had not dulled with her hearing loss. Clara considered carefully before responding in both sign and writing. Sarah said the man seemed to be watching the manor more than watching her specifically. She noticed him paying particular attention to who came and went, and she thought she saw him speaking with one of the footmen once, though she could not be certain. "Which footman?" William wrote quickly. "James Blackwood. He has been with the family for about a year. Sarah said there was something about him she did not trust, though she had no specific reason." William made a note of the name. James Blackwood. He would need to question the man, but carefully. If Sarah was right and someone at the manor was involved in whatever had frightened her, he could not risk alerting them to his investigation. Eleanor signed something else, and Clara translated. "Your mother suggests that the documents Sarah was repairing might be in the manor's library. Perhaps we should examine them." "An excellent idea," William wrote. "Miss Bennet, would Mrs. Ashford allow us access to the library? Could you arrange it?" Clara nodded and wrote, "Mrs. Ashford trusts me. I could tell her that I wish to complete Sarah's work on the documents as a tribute to my friend. She would likely grant permission. She has been distressed by Sarah's disappearance. though she is more concerned about the scandal than about Sarah herself. There was a note of bitterness in Clara's words that William understood completely. The wealthy often viewed their servants as interchangeable, valuable only for the services they provided. Sarah Porter's worth to Mrs. Ashford lay in her skill with a needle and her discretion, not in her humanity or the life she had lived. "When can you gain access?" William wrote. "Tomorrow afternoon. Mrs. Ashford takes tea with her social circle on Thursdays. The library will be empty. I will accompany you," William wrote. "We will go as friends visiting the manor, nothing official. I do not want to alert anyone that we are investigating." Clara agreed, and they spent the next hour planning their approach. Eleanor remained with them, offering suggestions through Clara's translation, her engagement with the discussion bringing color to her cheeks and life to her eyes. William marveled at the transformation in his mother. In just a few hours, Clara had given her something he had been unable to provide in 3 years: hope and purpose and connection. As the afternoon waned and Clara prepared to leave, Eleanor embraced her warmly. The older woman signed something, and Clara's eyes filled with tears. She signed back, and the two women held each other for a long moment. William waited, curious and moved by the display of emotion. When Clara turned to him, she wrote in her notebook, "Your mother says I have given her a gift beyond measure. She says she feels alive again, and she says you have found someone special, and she approves." William felt heat rise to his face. "My mother is presumptuous," he wrote, but he was smiling as he did so. Clara smiled back, a soft, knowing expression that made his heart race. "Perhaps," she wrote, "or perhaps she simply sees clearly." William walked Clara to the door, helping her with her coat. As she prepared to leave, he caught her hand gently. She looked up at him, her eyes questioning. He released her hand and signed, slowly and carefully, the phrase Clara had taught him that afternoon. "Thank you, friend." Clara's smile was radiant. She signed back, correcting his hand shape slightly with a gentle touch. Then she added another sign, one he did not yet know. Seeing his confusion, she wrote in her notebook one last time before departing. "I signed, 'You are welcome, William,' and then I signed, 'I am glad I met you.'" As William watched her walk down the street, her figure graceful in the gathering twilight, he realized that he was glad too. Glad in a way that went far beyond gratitude for her help with the case. Clara Bennett had entered his life like light breaking through clouds, illuminating corners he had not realized were dark. She was teaching him a new language, yes, but more than that, she was teaching him to see the world differently, to understand that what seemed like loss could also be transformation. That evening, William sat with his mother by the fire. Eleanor's hands moved constantly, practicing the signs Clara had taught her, her face more animated than he had seen in years. She signed to him, and he understood enough to know she was telling him that Clara was special, that he should not let her go. William signed back, telling his mother that he knew, that he felt something growing in his heart that both excited and terrified him. They sat together in comfortable silence, occasionally signing simple phrases to each other, learning together this new language of connection. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows, but inside, there was warmth and hope, and the promise of something beautiful beginning to bloom. The next afternoon arrived gray and misty, with a fine rain that seemed more like suspended moisture than actual drops. William met Clara at the corner of Beacon Street and Arlington, both of them dressed inconspicuously. Clara wore a dark green walking dress with a matching hat, and William was in civilian clothes rather than anything that might identify him as a detective. To any observer, they appeared to be exactly what they claimed to be, friends out for an afternoon call. As they walked together toward Ashford Manor, William found himself acutely aware of Clara's presence beside him. She moved with a quiet grace, her steps measured and sure even on the wet cobblestones. Occasionally their hands would brush as they walked, and each time, William felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with the investigation, and everything to do with the woman herself. They did not speak as they walked, the rain and the public street making conversation difficult. But William found that the silence between them was comfortable, even companionable. He was beginning to understand that silence was not emptiness, not when shared with someone like Clara. It was simply a different kind of communication, one that relied on presence and awareness rather than words. Ashford Manor loomed before them, its brick facade dark with rain, its many windows reflecting the gray sky like blind eyes. A servant admitted them at Clara's knock, and she led William through the servants' corridors to the library, a route that avoided the main house where Mrs. Ashford might see them. The library was a magnificent room, 2 stories tall with galleries on the upper level and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves made of rich mahogany. A large fireplace dominated one wall, cold now in Mrs. Ashford's absence. The room smelled of leather and old paper and the faint mustiness of age. Windows overlooking the garden let in the gray afternoon light, sufficient for reading but creating pockets of shadow in the room's corners. Clara moved confidently to a large desk near the windows where various documents were spread out, clearly the work Sarah had been doing before her disappearance. William followed, and together they began to examine the papers carefully. Most were old letters, correspondence between various Ashford family members dating back to the 1850s and 1860s. There were business documents, deeds to property, receipts for various transactions. William was methodically working through a stack of business records when Clara touched his arm urgently. She pointed to a document she had been examining, her face pale and troubled. William took it from her hands and read carefully. It was a bill of sale dated 1858, written in elaborate script on yellowed paper. The document recorded the sale of 4 human beings, a man, woman, and 2 children, from one plantation owner to another. The seller was listed as Theodore Ashford, Mrs. Ashford's late husband's grandfather. The sum paid was substantial, and the document was signed and witnessed according to the legal requirements of the time. William felt his stomach turn. Here was a record of the Ashford family's participation in slavery, a dark chapter of American history that many wealthy northern families preferred to forget they had been part of. Boston liked to think of itself as the cradle of abolition, but the reality was that many of its prominent families had profited from slavery, either directly or through business dealings with southern plantation owners. Clara was writing quickly in her notebook. There are more, many more. Sarah must have found these and realized what they meant. But why would this frighten her? This history is shameful, but it is in the past. William examined the other documents Clara indicated. There were more bills of sale, correspondence about the management of southern properties, records of cotton shipments. Then he found something else, a more recent document, dated just 2 years ago, 1895. It was a letter from a law firm in Charleston, South Carolina, addressed to the late Mr. Theodore Ashford, Jr., Mrs. Ashford's husband. The letter referenced a claim being made by the descendants of formerly enslaved people who had worked on Ashford properties. They were seeking compensation and recognition of their ancestors' labor and suffering. The law firm advised Mr. Ashford to destroy any documents that might support such claims and to deny any knowledge of the family's slaveholding past. This is what Sarah found. William wrote for Clara. Evidence that the Ashford family is being pursued for their past crimes, and evidence that they are actively trying to hide their history. If this became public, it would destroy their reputation and possibly cost them a great deal of money. Clara read his words, her expression growing more troubled. She wrote back, but would this be enough to make Sarah disappear? Would someone harm her to keep this secret? William considered carefully before responding. In my experience, people will do terrible things to protect their wealth and status. If Sarah threatened to expose this, either deliberately or inadvertently, she could have put herself in grave danger. William carefully gathered the most incriminating documents, folding them into his coat pocket while Clara kept watch at the library door. The rain had intensified outside, drumming against the windows with increasing urgency, as if nature itself sensed the gravity of what they had discovered. As William secured the last document, a sound from the hallway made Clara stiffen. She turned to him, her eyes wide with alarm, and gestured frantically toward the door. Heavy footsteps approached, accompanied by voices. William recognized the clipped, authoritative tone of Mrs. Ashford, but there was another voice as well, deeper and unfamiliar. Clara grabbed William's arm and pulled him toward a side door, partially hidden behind a tall bookshelf. They slipped through just as the library's main door opened, finding themselves in a narrow corridor that appeared to connect the library to other parts of the manor. They pressed themselves against the wall in the dimly lit passage, barely breathing. Through the partially open door, they could hear the conversation in the library with painful clarity. "I assure you, Mrs. Ashford, the situation is well in hand," the unfamiliar male voice said. It was smooth, cultured, with an underlying hardness that made William's instincts sharpen. "The girl will not be causing any further problems. You promised me discretion, Mr. Blackwood," Mrs. Ashford replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I never wanted anyone to be hurt. I simply needed those documents secured. My late husband's reputation, my family's standing in this city, everything we have built depends on those secrets remaining buried." William felt Clara's hand tighten on his arm. Blackwood, the footman Sarah had not trusted, but his voice and manner suggested he was far more than a mere servant. "Your husband made certain arrangements before his death," Blackwood continued. "Arrangements to protect the family from exactly this sort of threat. The descendants of your family's former slaves have been persistent in their claims, but without documentation they have no case. The girl was foolish to think she could use what she found for leverage." "Leverage?" Mrs. Ashford's voice rose in pitch. "She was trying to blackmail me?" "In a manner of speaking. She came to me 3 weeks ago, claiming she had found documents that proved the Ashford family's slaveholding past. She said she would take them to the newspapers unless she was compensated for her silence. Quite enterprising for a seamstress, really." William felt Clara trembling beside him. They both knew this was a lie. Sarah's journal had made clear she was frightened, not opportunistic. She had been running from Blackwood, not attempting to extort money from him. "Where is she now?" Mrs. Ashford asked, and there was genuine distress in her voice. "I never wanted violence, Mr. Blackwood. I am not a cruel woman." "You are a practical woman," Blackwood corrected smoothly. "The girl is somewhere she cannot cause trouble. That is all you need to know. Plausible deniability, Mrs. Ashford. It protects us both." "Us?" "There is no us, Mr. Blackwood. You were hired to manage this situation quietly, to retrieve the documents and ensure the girl's silence. I did not authorize kidnapping or worse. You authorized whatever was necessary." Blackwood's voice had turned cold. "You knew what you were asking when you brought me into your confidence. Did you truly believe the girl would simply hand over evidence of your family's crimes and keep quiet? You are not naive, Mrs. Ashford. You simply prefer not to acknowledge the ugliness required to maintain your beautiful life." There was a long silence. When Mrs. Ashford spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "I want this finished. I want the girl returned safely, and I want you gone from my house. I'm afraid it's too late for that. The girl knows too much, and now unfortunately so do you. You should have been content to remain ignorant, Mrs. Ashford. It would have been safer." The threat in Blackwood's words was unmistakable. William reached for the pistol he carried in his shoulder holster, his movements slow and silent. Beside him, Clara had gone very still, her face pale in the dim light of the corridor. He could see her mind working, her eyes darting between him and the door, calculating their options. "Are you threatening me in my own home?" Mrs. Ashford's voice had regained some of its steel. "I am not some powerless seamstress, Mr. Blackwood. I have friends, connections, resources, and I have information that would destroy you," Blackwood replied. "Information about more than just your family's slaveholding past. I know about the fraudulent land deals, the bribes to city officials, the manipulation of your late husband's will. You brought me into your confidence, Mrs. Ashford, and I have been very thorough in my research. If I go down, you go down with me." William knew they had heard enough. They had confirmation that Sarah Porter had been taken by Blackwood, that she was being held somewhere against her will, and that Mrs. Ashford, however reluctantly, had been complicit in the crime. He needed to act, but he also needed to ensure Clara's safety. The narrow corridor they occupied had no other exits that he could see, and confronting Blackwood now would put Clara directly in danger. He turned to Clara and signed slowly, making sure she could see his hands in the dim light. He had practiced with his mother the previous evening, and he hoped he was conveying his meaning correctly. "Stay here. Hide. I will handle this. Trust me." Clara shook her head vehemently, her hands moving in rapid signs he could not fully follow. But her meaning was clear enough in her expression. She would not leave him to face danger alone. William felt a surge of affection for her courage, even as he feared for her safety. Before he could protest further, the decision was taken from them. The door to the corridor was suddenly pulled fully open, and Blackwood stood there, his hand on the knob, his eyes narrowing as he spotted them in the shadows. He was a man of medium height but powerfully built, with a hard face and cold gray eyes. His suit was expensive, far too fine for a footman, confirming William's suspicion that his role in the household was a facade. "Well?" Blackwood said slowly, his voice carrying a dangerous calm. "It seems we have eavesdroppers. How unfortunate." William stepped forward, positioning himself between Blackwood and Clara. "Detective William Hartford, Boston Police," he announced, his voice steady and authoritative. "You are under arrest for the kidnapping of Sarah Porter and conspiracy to conceal evidence of criminal activity." Blackwood's expression did not change, but William saw his hand move toward his coat pocket. William's own hand went to his pistol, drawing it smoothly and leveling it at Blackwood's chest. "I would not advise it," William said quietly. "Whatever weapon you are reaching for, mine is already drawn." Behind Blackwood, Mrs. Ashford appeared in the doorway, her face ashen. "Detective? Oh God, what have I done?" Her voice broke on the last word, and she swayed as if she might faint. "Mrs. Ashford, please step back into the library," William instructed, his eyes never leaving Blackwood. "You will need to make a full statement to the police. If you cooperate, it will go better for you." Blackwood laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "You think you have won, Detective? You have no idea what you are dealing with. The Ashford family's secrets go far deeper than a few old slave documents. There are powerful people who have a vested interest in keeping those secrets buried." "Then they should have chosen a more competent criminal," William replied. "Where is Sarah Porter? Tell me now, and I will see that it is taken into consideration." "She is alive," Blackwood said, "for now. But she will not remain so if I do not return to her location by nightfall. I have an associate watching her, with instructions to eliminate her if I fail to arrive. So you see, Detective, shooting me would be most unwise." William felt his jaw clench. It was an old criminal's gambit, and he had no way of knowing if Blackwood was bluffing. But he could not risk Sarah's life on the assumption that he was. "Then you will take me to her." "Now, I think not. I think instead we will reach an agreement. You will allow me to leave this manor unimpeded. In 2 hours, I will send word of Miss Porter's location. She will be unharmed, and I will be long gone. You can have the girl or you can have me, Detective, but you cannot have both." It was Clara who broke the stalemate. She moved forward before William could stop her, stepping around him to face Blackwood directly. Her hands moved in rapid, angry signs, her face fierce with determination. Blackwood stared at her, clearly surprised by her boldness. "The deaf girl," he said slowly. "The seamstress's friend. How touching. But your theatrics mean nothing to me. I do not understand your hand-waving." Clara's expression changed, becoming calculating. She pulled out her notebook and wrote quickly, showing it first to William. He read, "I know where Sarah is. I deciphered her coded message completely. She told me the location in case something happened to her." William's mind raced. Was Clara bluffing? Or had she truly understood something in Sarah's message that she had not shared with him? Either way, she was taking an enormous risk. Clara showed the note to Blackwood. His expression shifted, uncertainty flickering across his hard features. "You are lying," he said, but there was doubt in his voice. Clara wrote again. Sarah wrote that she was taken to the basement of the old Beacon grain warehouse on Commercial Street. She scratched the message into the wall of her cell, using a nail from her shoe. She knew someone would eventually find it, even if she did not survive. Your associate cannot hide what is already discovered. William did not know if Clara was telling the truth, or if she was making a desperate gamble. But her performance was convincing enough that Blackwood's certainty wavered. The man's hand moved away from his pocket, and William saw the moment when he made his decision. Blackwood lunged forward, shoving Clara hard into William. They both stumbled backward, and Blackwood ran, not toward the library where Mrs. Ashford stood frozen, but deeper into the corridor, toward what must be a servant's staircase. William caught Clara before she fell, steadying her quickly, then took off after Blackwood. The chase led through narrow passages and down steep stairs, through the bowels of the manor where servants moved unseen by the family above. William's longer legs gave him an advantage, and he was closing the distance when Blackwood burst through a door into the kitchen. 2 scullery maids shrieked and scattered as the men raced through, Blackwood overturning a table of vegetables in William's path. William vaulted the obstacle and followed Blackwood out the kitchen door into the rear courtyard. The rain was falling in sheets now, turning the cobblestones treacherous. Blackwood was heading for the carriage house, where William could see a fine black horse already saddled, clearly prepared for a quick escape. But William was faster. He caught Blackwood just as the man reached for the horse's reins, tackling him to the ground. They grappled in the rain-soaked courtyard. Blackwood fighting with desperate strength. He managed to land a solid blow to William's ribs, driving the air from his lungs, but William's training and size gave him the advantage. He pinned Blackwood face down against the cobblestones, wrenching the man's arms behind his back. "Where is Sarah Porter?" William demanded, his voice rough with exertion. "Tell me now, or I swear I will make your situation considerably worse." Blackwood spat mud and rain. "The warehouse," he gasped. "What the deaf girl said, it is true, but there is no associate. I was bluffing. The girl is locked in the basement alone. She has been there for 3 days. William felt rage surge through him. 3 days, alone in the dark, without food or water, not knowing if anyone would find her, or if she would die there. He hauled Blackwood to his feet, securing his wrists with the handcuffs he carried. Clara appeared in the doorway, her dress soaked from rain, her hair coming loose from its pins. Her eyes found William's, and he saw the relief in them, quickly followed by urgency. She signed something, and though William's knowledge was limited, he understood. "Sarah, we must go to her now." William nodded. He called to the stable boy who had emerged from the carriage house, staring wide-eyed at the scene. "You there, run to the police station on Pemberton Square. Tell them Detective Hartford needs immediate assistance at Ashford Manor. Can you do that?" The boy nodded and took off running. William secured Blackwood to a post in the courtyard, ensuring he could not escape, then turned to Clara. "Show me," he said, and signed simultaneously. "Take me to Sarah." They left Blackwood for the arriving officers and took William's own horse from the manor's stable, Clara riding behind him, her arms wrapped around his waist as they raced through the rain-slicked streets toward Commercial Street and the waterfront. The old Beacon Grain warehouse loomed against the gray sky, abandoned and decrepit, its windows broken and its walls stained with years of neglect. William dismounted and helped Clara down, then forced open the warehouse's rusted door. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of mold. They made their way carefully through the debris-strewn main floor, finding the stairs that led down to the basement. William lit the oil lamp he had grabbed from the manor's stable, and by its flickering light, they descended into the darkness. The basement was a maze of old storage rooms and passages, but Clara moved with certainty, as if she truly had known where to find Sarah all along. William followed, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. What would they find? Would Sarah still be alive after 3 days without care? They found her in a small room at the far end of the basement, locked behind a heavy door that William had to force open with his shoulder. Sarah Porter lay on a pile of old grain sacks, unconscious but breathing. She was pale and dehydrated, her lips cracked, but alive. Clara dropped to her knees beside her friend, tears streaming down her face as she gently touched Sarah's cheek. Sarah's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then widening with recognition. Her lips moved, forming Clara's name, though no sound emerged from her parched throat. Clara signed frantically, and though Sarah could not respond in kind, William saw understanding in her eyes. "We need to get her to a hospital," William said, and Clara nodded vigorously. He lifted Sarah carefully in his arms, marveling at how light she was, how fragile. Clara led the way back through the basement and up the stairs, holding the lamp high to light their path. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the late afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds, casting golden light across the wet cobblestones. William secured Sarah on his horse, and Clara climbed up behind her, supporting her friend, as William led the horse at a careful pace toward Massachusetts General Hospital. As they moved through the streets, William found himself reflecting on the past few days, on everything that had changed since he first met Clara outside Ashford Manor. She had come into his life as a witness in a case, but she had become so much more. She had given his mother hope and purpose. She had taught him a new language, a new way of seeing the world, and she had shown a courage and cleverness that had been instrumental in saving Sarah's life. At the hospital, doctors and nurses rushed to take Sarah into their care. Clara refused to leave her friend's side, and William waited in the corridor, giving his statement to the officers who arrived to take his report. Mrs. Ashford had been arrested, along with Blackwood. The documents William had taken from the library would be used as evidence. The case would be a scandal, he knew, but justice would be served. Hours passed before a doctor finally emerged to tell them that Sarah would recover. She was severely dehydrated and malnourished, but with rest and care, she would heal. Clara sagged with relief against William, and without thinking, he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. She did not pull away, but instead rested her head against his chest, letting him support her weight as the tension and fear of the day finally released their hold. They stood that way for a long moment, in the quiet hospital corridor, two people who had found each other in the midst of darkness and danger. When Clara finally pulled back to look up at him, William saw in her eyes everything he was feeling. Relief, gratitude, and something deeper, something that made his heart race and his breath catch. He raised his hands and signed slowly, carefully, the words Clara had taught him. "You are brave, you are amazing. I am grateful I met you." Clara's smile was radiant despite her exhaustion. She signed back, her movements graceful even in her weariness, and though William did not understand all of it, he understood enough. She was telling him that she felt the same way, that something had grown between them in these few short days, something precious and real. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah Porter's rescue, and autumn had deepened its hold on Boston. The trees along Mount Vernon Street blazed with crimson and gold, their leaves drifting down like memories settling into place. William stood at his study window, watching the late afternoon sun paint the brownstones in shades of amber and rose, his mind wandering through the events that had transformed his life so completely in such a short time. The trial of Mrs. Catherine Ashford and Gregory Blackwood had concluded just yesterday. The courtroom had been packed with journalists and curious citizens, all eager to witness the fall of one of Boston's most prominent families. The evidence William had gathered from the library, combined with Sarah's testimony and the documents found in Blackwood's possession, had been damning. Mrs. Ashford had been sentenced to 5 years in prison for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Blackwood, facing charges of kidnapping, extortion, and attempted murder, would spend the next 20 years behind bars. But the most significant outcome of the trial had been the attention it brought to the claims of the descendants of the Ashford family's former slaves. The publicity surrounding the case had prompted other prominent Boston families to examine their own histories, and a movement was growing to provide restitution and recognition to those whose ancestors had suffered under the institution of slavery. It was not enough, William knew. It could never be enough to compensate for the horror and injustice that had been done. But it was a beginning, a step toward acknowledgement and healing. Sarah Porter had recovered fully from her ordeal, though the experience had left her changed. She had found employment with a textile merchant who valued her skills and paid her fairly, and she had moved into a small but comfortable boarding house near the Common. More importantly, she had found her voice. During the trial, she had testified with clarity and courage, her words translated into sign language by Clara for the benefit of the deaf community members who had come to support her. The newspapers had called her brave, a voice for the voiceless, and Sarah had taken that role seriously. She was now working with advocacy groups to improve conditions for working women across the city. William smiled, thinking of how Sarah and Clara had become even closer through the ordeal. Their friendship was a beautiful thing to witness. 2 women who communicated without sound but understood each other perfectly. And watching them together had taught William even more about the deaf community, about the richness and depth of sign language, about the strength required to navigate a world designed for the hearing. His mother's transformation had been equally remarkable. Eleanor Hartford had thrown herself into learning sign language with a determination and joy that had astounded William. Clara had been coming to their home 3 times a week to teach them both, and Eleanor had also begun attending gatherings at the church that served the deaf community. She had made friends, real friends who understood her experience, who communicated with her effortlessly in their shared language. The isolation that had plagued her for 3 years had lifted like morning fog, revealing a woman who was vibrant, engaged, and happy, and Clara. William's thoughts always returned to Clara, as they had done countless times each day since the case had closed. She had become an integral part of his life, of his family, and of his heart. The more time he spent with her, the more he learned her language and her ways of seeing the world, the more certain he became that she was the woman he wanted to spend his life with. Their courtship had been unconventional by society's standards. They communicated in a mixture of sign language, writing, and increasingly, William's improving ability to understand her signs and respond in kind. They took long walks through the public garden, where they could sign freely without the constraints of pen and paper. They attended lectures at the museum, sat together in comfortable silence in his family's parlor, and slowly, carefully, built a relationship based on understanding, respect, and a growing love that needed no words to express its depth. William had been learning not just sign language, but the culture and community that came with it. He had attended social gatherings with Clara, met other deaf individuals who were teachers, artists, businessmen, and scholars. He had learned that deafness was not a tragedy to be pitied, but simply a different way of experiencing the world, one with its own beauty and strengths. And he had fallen more deeply in love with Clara with each passing day, not despite her deafness, but with all of who she was, including it. Now, as he stood at his window, William was preparing for the most important conversation of his life. He had purchased a ring the day before, a simple but elegant band with a small diamond, all he could afford on a detective's salary. But he hoped Clara would see in it what he intended, a promise, a commitment, a future built together. The doorbell chimed, and William's heart leapt. He heard his mother's footsteps in the hall, heard the door open, and then Eleanor appeared in his study doorway, her face alight with joy. She signed to him, "Clara is here. And William, she looks beautiful." William signed back, "Thank you, Mother. Could you give us some time alone?" Eleanor's eyes sparkled with understanding and approval. She signed, "Of course, I will be in the kitchen if you need me. Good luck, my son. I am so proud of you." Clara entered the study a moment later, and William's breath caught as it always did when he saw her. She wore a dress of deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes, and her dark hair was arranged in an elegant style that framed her face perfectly. But it was her smile that captivated him most, that radiant expression of joy and affection that she seemed to reserve especially for him. She signed a greeting, and William responded in kind, his hands forming the shapes with increasing confidence. They had fallen into a comfortable routine of signing when they were together, with William occasionally asking for clarification when he encountered a sign he did not yet know. Clara was always patient, always encouraging, and her delight in his progress was evident in every expression and gesture. "Please, sit," William signed, gesturing to the sofa near the fire. Clara settled onto the cushions with her characteristic grace, and William sat beside her, close enough that their knees nearly touched. He had been rehearsing what he wanted to say, practicing the signs until he could perform them smoothly. But now that the moment had arrived, his nervousness made his hands tremble slightly. Clara noticed immediately. She reached out and took his hands in hers, her touch warm and reassuring. She looked into his eyes, her expression questioning and concerned. William took a deep breath and began to sign, speaking aloud simultaneously as had become his habit, though he knew Clara could not hear his words. "Clara, these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. You have taught me so much, not just about sign language, but about seeing the world differently, about communication that goes beyond sound, about courage and strength and beauty. You have given my mother her life back, and you have given me something I did not know I was missing." Clara's eyes had begun to shimmer with unshed tears, but she was smiling as she watched his hands form each sign. William continued, his confidence growing as he saw her response. "I have been changed by knowing you, Clara. I am a better man, a better son, a better person, because you came into my life, and I do not want to imagine a future without you in it. I want to wake up every morning and see your smile. I want to learn every sign in your language, and I want to create new signs that belong only to us. I want to build a life with you, a home where both sound and silence are valued, where love is expressed in every way possible." William released one of Clara's hands and reached into his pocket, withdrawing the small velvet box that held the ring. Clara's free hand went to her mouth, her eyes widening with surprise and joy. William opened the box, revealing the simple band with its small diamond, and then signed with one hand while holding the box in the other, a clumsy but earnest gesture. "Clara Bennett, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my love for the rest of our lives?" For a moment Clara was completely still, tears now streaming freely down her cheeks. Then her hands moved, signing rapidly, her face alight with emotion. William caught some of it, understood yes and love you and happy. But Clara, seeing his struggle to follow, pulled him close and kissed him instead, her lips soft and warm against his, her hands coming up to cup his face tenderly. It was their first kiss, and it was everything William had imagined and more. There was joy in it, and promise, and a communication more profound than any language could express. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and smiling, Clara took the ring from the box and slipped it onto her own finger, then held up her hand to admire it, her face radiant with happiness. She reached for the notebook she always carried, writing quickly while William waited, his heart so full he thought it might burst. Clara showed him what she had written. "Yes, William Hartford, I will marry you. I will be your wife with all my heart. You have shown me that love does not need sound to be heard, that understanding goes deeper than words, that two people from different worlds can build a bridge between them made of patience, respect, and devotion. I love you more than I have words or signs to express. Thank you for seeing me, truly seeing me, and loving all of who I am." William read her words through tears of his own, then pulled her close again, holding her against his chest, feeling her heartbeat against his. They stayed that way for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, in the quiet study with the fire crackling softly and the autumn light fading outside the windows. Eleanor appeared in the doorway eventually, though William suspected she had been waiting just out of sight for the right moment. When she saw Clara's hand with the ring on it, she let out a cry of joy and rushed to embrace them both. The three of them stood together, signing and laughing and crying, a family united not by blood alone but by love and understanding and shared language. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. William and Clara decided on a spring wedding, giving them time to prepare and to navigate the social complexities of their union. There were those who disapproved, who whispered that a detective should not marry a deaf woman, that Clara's disability would be an impediment to William's career and social standing. But William and Clara faced the criticism together, their love and commitment to each other stronger than any prejudice they encountered. Sarah Porter insisted on making Clara's wedding dress, a labor of love that took months of careful work. The gown was a masterpiece of ivory silk and delicate lace, elegant and beautiful, perfectly suited to Clara's grace and personality. Eleanor Hartford planned the reception with joy and energy, working with Clara to ensure that the celebration would be accessible to both deaf and hearing guests, with interpreters present and arrangements made for visual announcements and communication. The wedding itself took place on a bright April morning in 1898, in a small church that served both the deaf and hearing communities. The ceremony was conducted in both spoken English and sign language, a beautiful blending of two worlds coming together. William stood at the altar in his best suit, his hands trembling slightly as he waited for Clara to appear. When she did, walking down the aisle on the arm of the pastor who had raised her after her parents' death, William felt his eyes fill with tears. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, her face alight with joy, her eyes locked on his. As she reached his side, he signed to her, "You are perfect. I love you." Clara signed back, "I love you too, today and always." The pastor conducted the ceremony in both languages, speaking words aloud while an interpreter signed them for the deaf members of the congregation. When it came time for the vows, William and Clara had chosen to sign theirs to each other, their hands moving in graceful patterns that expressed their promises of love, fidelity, support, and partnership. There was not a dry eye in the church as they exchanged rings and sealed their union with a kiss that drew applause from all present. The reception was held at William's family home, now transformed with flowers and decorations, filled with friends from both the hearing and deaf communities. Music played for those who could hear it, while deaf guests enjoyed the visual beauty of the celebration and the rich conversations in sign language that flowed throughout the gathering. It was a party that celebrated not just a marriage, but a bridging of worlds, a demonstration that love and community could transcend the barriers of difference. As evening fell and guests began to depart, William and Clara stood together in the garden behind the house, watching the last light fade from the spring sky. Clara's head rested on William's shoulder, and his arm was wrapped around her waist, holding her close. They did not need to sign to communicate in that moment. The peace and joy and contentment that flowed between them required no words or gestures. But after a while, Clara lifted her head and signed to her new husband. "What are you thinking about?" William smiled and signed back, his hands now moving with confidence and fluency. "I am thinking about how you came into my life to help me solve a mystery, and instead you solved the mystery of my own heart. I am thinking about how blessed I am to have found you, to have learned your language, to have been welcomed into your world. I am thinking about our future, about the children we might have, about the life we will build together, and I am thinking that I am the happiest man alive. Clara's eyes shone with tears and joy. She signed, "I am thinking similar thoughts, that you saw past my deafness to the person I am, that you valued my language and my community, that you gave your mother the gift of connection and hope, that you are brave and good and loving. And I am thinking that our story is just beginning, and I cannot wait to see where it leads us." They kissed again as the stars began to appear overhead, two people who had found each other across the silence, who had built a bridge of understanding and love, who had proven that communication goes far deeper than sound, that connection requires only an open heart and a willingness to learn a new language. Inside the house, Eleanor Hartford watched through the window, her own heart full of gratitude. She had gained a daughter, a beautiful young woman who had changed both her life and her son's in ways she could never have imagined. And she had gained a new language, a new community, a new way of experiencing the world. The silence that had once isolated her had become a doorway to connection and belonging. Sarah Porter stood beside Eleanor, signing as she spoke aloud for Eleanor's benefit. "They are perfect together. I am so happy for them both." Eleanor signed back with increasing skill. "Clara saved more than just you, Sarah. She saved my son from a life of loneliness, and she saved me from isolation. She is a gift to our family. She is a gift to everyone who knows her." Sarah agreed. "And William is worthy of her. Not many men would have taken the time to learn, to understand, to truly see Clara for who she is. Their love is something special." As the two women stood together, watching the newlyweds in the garden, the house around them filled with the warmth of friendship and family, a new chapter began for all of them. William would continue his work as a detective, but he would also become an advocate for the deaf community, using his position to push for better accessibility and recognition. Clara would continue teaching sign language, eventually opening a school where both deaf and hearing children could learn together. Eleanor would become a prominent member of the deaf community, her home a gathering place for social events and advocacy meetings. And through it all, William and Clara's love would grow deeper and stronger, weathering the challenges that came their way, raising three beautiful children who grew up bilingual in English and American Sign Language, building a life that honored both sound and silence, that celebrated difference and found strength in unity. Years later, when William was asked about the case that had changed his life, he would smile and sign as he spoke. "I set out to solve the mystery of a missing woman, and in the process, I found my heart's home. Clara's sign language did not just touch my heart, it opened it, expanded it, and filled it with more love than I knew was possible. And it all started with my mother, with Clara's kindness to a deaf woman who needed hope, and with a young seamstress brave enough to leave a message in a language only her truest friend could read." The case of Sarah Porter's disappearance became one of William's most famous, not because of the prominent family involved or the scandal that ensued, but because of the lives it touched and changed forever. Sarah went on to become a successful advocate for workers' rights. Eleanor Hartford lived many more happy years, surrounded by friends and family who communicated with her in her own language. And William and Clara Hartford built a legacy of love, understanding, and bridge building between communities that would impact Boston for generations to come. On their 25th wedding anniversary, as they sat together in their garden watching their grandchildren play, Clara signed to William, "Do you remember the day we met? In the rain outside Ashford Manor?" William signed back, his hands still graceful despite the silver in his hair. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. I remember not understanding your signs but wanting desperately to learn them. I remember feeling that my life was about to change, though I did not yet know how. I remember being afraid you would not help Sarah." Clara signed. "I remember thinking you were handsome but wondering if you would be like so many others, unable to see past my deafness. And then you asked about teaching your mother, and I knew you were different. I knew you were special. We were both right." William signed with a smile. Both our lives changed that day, for the better, for the forever. Clara leaned in to kiss her husband. Their love as strong at 50 as it had been at 25. Their communication as rich and deep as ever. Around them, their grandchildren played and laughed, signing to each other as naturally as they spoke, growing up in a world where silence and sound existed in harmony, where love was expressed in multiple languages, where difference was celebrated rather than feared. And in that garden, on that spring afternoon, with the scent of flowers in the air and the warmth of sun on their faces, William and Clara Hartford lived the truth they had discovered together all those years ago, that love needs no sound to be heard, no words to be understood, only an open heart and the willingness to learn each other's language, whatever form that language might take. Their story became a testament to the power of connection across difference, a reminder that the barriers we face are often of our own making, and that with patience, respect, and love, any divide can be bridged. It was a story that began with a mystery and ended with a marriage, that started with silence and filled it with meaning, that proved beyond doubt that true communication comes not from the ears or the mouth, but from the heart. And it all began the day Clara Bennett's sign language touched Detective William Hartford's heart, starting with his mother, and ending with a love that would last a lifetime and beyond.